This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
I'd like to call Thursday, January 12th, 2023, special meeting of the North Haven Board of Education to order at 6 p.m. Tonight's meeting will be a workshop to review and discuss the superintendent's 23-24 budget proposal. Mr. Stirk and Mr. Wardlow will open tonight's workshop with an overview of the recommendation. This will be followed by a review and discussion concerning the budget proposals for student services, North Haven High School, IT, and facilities. 2023-24 Superintendent's Budget Recommendations, Priorities.
Thank you, Mr. Becker. Good evening, board members. Happy budget season. So tonight I'll be presenting the superintendent's budget recommendation for the 23-24 school year. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Melinda, Jen S., Jen K., our principals, Phil, Diana, content area coordinators, central office staff, student services, personnel, all who were involved in the process of preparing this year's proposed budget for consideration by the members of the Board of Education. A special thank you to our Director of Finance, Operations, and Human Resources, Howard Wardlow. This being Howard's third budget season, he's been able to realign specific areas of the budget to create greater transparency and detail to this year's recommendation. And I'd also like to acknowledge Ann Johnson. She is the district's budget and special revenue accountant for all her efforts behind the scenes. So there's a little change to the overall budget at all levels and within all departments this year. The far majority of increases are a result of contractual obligations and cost of benefits. So within this year's budget recommendation, there's a proposal to retain 4 full-time positions and add an interventionist position that was in place prior to the pandemic. There are also a few additions to the athletic department that Howard and I will elaborate on later in the presentation. So the district directors and building principals responsibly created their budgets for the 23-24 school year. Howard and I spent time with each of them to review, revise, and reduce where possible, while still ensuring that we are meeting all obligations and staying true to the district's mission. Tonight, Jen Stewart will speak to the major highlights within the Student Services Department budget, and there'll be a discussion and review concerning the high school, IT, and facilities. And this review and discussion will also include the capital budget and plan. So the budgeting process is one of the most important tasks the district and the Board of Education take on to reach the objectives within our mission statement. The NHPS mission statement is as follows. It is the mission of the North Haven Public Schools in collaboration with students, parents, and community to develop responsible, educated, and productive global citizens who can thrive in an ever-changing world. The vision of a graduate is the foundation for this budget proposal. The VOG provides direction, priorities, and frames how the district will utilize the allocated funds. So in pursuing this mission, we believe we must provide opportunities for all students to independently, collaboratively, and creatively solve rigorous everyday problems. Honor and value empathy and compassion for all individuals throughout our diverse community. Support all students in making strong and positive contributions to their community. Provide all students with a safe learning environment to explore their strengths and vulnerabilities to develop self-worth. And support each other in times of challenge. So as we focus on the budgeting process, my responsibility is to collaborate with district leaders to design a fiscally responsible budget that ensures the following: equitable and developmentally appropriate educational experiences between all schools, safe and clean learning environments, fulfillment of all statutory obligations, and continue to advance the Board of Education goals. So in creating this budget recommendation, we were committed to maintaining these priorities. Maintain the district's focus on improving achievement and providing extracurricular opportunities for all students, meet all contractual obligations, and utilize the vision of the graduate to drive budget planning. So provided in this budget recommendation are resources to educate 3,175 students. Mental health, nutrition, and medical care to allow students to access instruction. Specialized services required for all students to meet their potential. Diverse opportunities for students to engage in activities outside of their curricular pursuits. And transportation to and from school. So North Haven Public Schools continues to excel in academic areas and is providing numerous opportunities and activities to support the whole student. This portion of the presentation will highlight a few of those achievements, as well as how we are measuring the return on the board's and the community's investment. The District Reference Group, or DIRG, is a method in which Connecticut groups similar school districts. The grouping takes into account annual household income, students who receive free and reduced lunch, and other factors. And this grouping, or DIRG, allows people to compare multiple areas of similar districts, such as performance, expenditures, and staffing. So the average per pupil expenditure for DIRG D is $19,365. North Haven's PPE is $19,184. So North Haven spends $181 less per student per year than this average. So an additional $570,000, which is just shy of about 1% of the budget, would be needed to meet the average PPE for our DIRG. So for comparison purposes, North Haven is about $3,200 from the lowest per pupil expenditure and about $5,700 from the top spending district. This chart shows the highest and lowest spending districts within our DIRG. North Haven ranks 11th out of 24 districts, and just for perspective, there's very little change to the overall ranking from last year to this year. So the district's achievement reflect a substantial return on investment based on the district's funding comparisons. Last school year, North Haven ranked 3rd in the Smarter Balance Assessment for English Language Arts and 6th in the area of math. And North Haven's 5th graders ranked 2nd in the DIRG on the Next Generation Science Standards Assessment. So we are spending below the average in many areas and achieving above average results in our DIRG. And really our goal is to maintain and build upon these successes. So the district was also able to provide the following to our students: community-based health services at all 6 schools. And initially, these services were solely provided to the middle and high schools. However, thanks to the insight and persistence of Jen Stewart, the district was able to make these services available to all students within the district. Now, although these services are not directly accounted for in the budget, they require significant planning and time at the district level. The Unified Arts offerings for elementary students were revamped in order to incorporate science, technology, engineering, and mathematics classes, otherwise known as STEM classes. And these are provided to elementary students on a weekly basis. So Melinda worked diligently to reallocate funds in order to provide this much needed upgrade. Jen Kay and the IT department purchased hundreds of ebooks for students to read in school and at home. And these titles were curated by the district's K-8 ELA coordinator to ensure a variety of titles and levels were available to all students. And Melinda has spent significant time establishing a great working relationship with Goodwin University. And this relationship has allowed us to improve and increase the offerings in the area of career and technology education, specifically around manufacturing. One thing not listed in this list are the highlights, are some highlights and some upgrades to the physical and digital security throughout the district. Many of these upgrades go intentionally unseen, and a conscious effort has been made to really significantly fortify this infrastructure over the past few years. So as a reference point, the town of North Haven allocates roughly 52% of its budget to the Board of Education. This ranks 21st within our DIRG. So only 3 other districts allocate less than this percentage to their boards of education. So North Haven is about 10% below the DIRG D average in this area. And the reason I bring this point to the board's attention is just to provide perspective in that the board's annual budget requests are appropriate and are in line with other districts within our DIRG. And really just to steal Amanda's words, North Haven's punching above our weight class, and we have really a lot of areas to be proud of. So, superintendent's budget proposal. The requested increase for the 23-24 school year is $1,727,624, which brings the annual Board of Education budget to $61,893,954. This represents a 2.87 increase from last year's approved budget. This increase will meet all contractual obligations, healthcare benefits, and increases in the utilities. It also covers new positions and programs, which will be highlighted later in the presentation. I will now turn the next few slides over to Howard, and he'll provide an overview and address the major budget drivers.
So what we've done with this slide is we've grouped the object codes by larger categories. And as the chart indicates, salaries, non-salary payroll, and benefits make up 78% of the budget and are increasing at 4.4%, 9.3%, and 1.7% respectively. When adding in all other non-discretionary categories such as utilities, facilities, rentals and leases, transportation, insurance, and the non-discretionary portion of professional services, it raises the non-discretionary portion of the budget to 96% of the total, which is in line with last year. Aggregate non-discretionary spending increased by 3.03% for the in this budget, and discretionary spending actually decreased by a little less than 1% at 0.76%. At this point, I'd like to stop and ask the board if they have any questions regarding this slide or the numbers that are presented here.
Can you just repeat them one more time for me?
So,
Thank you.
so the non-discretionary spending is 96% of the budget, and discretionary spending is 4%, which aligns with last year's numbers. And discretionary spending is increasing by just a little over 3%, 3.03%. Non-discretionary spending is by 3.03%, and discretionary spending is going down by a little less than 1%, or 0.76%.
Thank you.
The next two charts, what we've done is taken that first chart and actually put it into a visual. I'm a more visual person myself, so we put it into a pie chart to show you by dollars and then by percentage. And as you can see, it visually shows you what makes up the largest parts of the budget. With that, I'll pass it back to Patrick.
You got one more,
I'm sorry, I apologize, yes. This slide is an increase by category. This chart is showing the increase for each category, and there are a couple of items to note here. The first is at salaries, which increased by 4.42% overall, but have increased by 3.8% at the new positions. The 3 elementary teachers, the reading interventionist, and the athletic trainer were not included. I just want to bring that to your attention, that's the differential between the two and the change. The second is the non-salary payroll, specifically the stipend line, which increased by 13.5%, would have only increased by 2.1% without the new coaches, the after-school support, the detention stipend, sped teacher summer hours, which are all stipends that were not included in this line in last year's budget. And just to give you a little reasoning behind that, a lot of those items, such as the after-school support, the detentions, weren't happening through COVID, so they weren't being budgeted for, so we had to add them back into the budget now, and so that's why you're seeing such a large increase in these stipends.
All right, thank you, Howard. So before moving on to new positions and programs, I just want to highlight a very important area that hits a major positive for the district. When Jen Stewart assumed the director's position in 2019, we made a conscious effort to lessen the number of students who are placed in an out-of-district special education school. And the main reason for this is that we truly believe that students should be given every opportunity to be educated in their home district. In order to move this belief into action, we needed to add resources to enhance our district programs in order to support all of our students. As a result of these enhancements, we're beginning to see a significant decline in students who are placed at an out-of-district special education school. And as you can see, in 2019, there were 32 students at this type of placement, and at present, the number has decreased to 18. Now, a secondary benefit to this is that the district's budget line for tuition has decreased 18.4%. The decrease has allowed us to offset costs that are out of our control, such as significant increases to utilities and to gas. So for this year's proposal to address all the needs of the district and increase services in needed areas and to provide extracurricular opportunities for our students and to remain at a 2.87%, we kind of believe is nothing short of miraculous. These type of efforts and offsets have allowed us to keep the request at a reasonable level. So planning for the future. This portion of the presentation will highlight the additional programs and positions included in this year's proposal. So 2 years ago, the district hired 5 elementary teachers using ESSER III funding. And the goal was to lessen the number of students in K-3 classrooms. So our intention was to keep these positions in place for 2 years. Due to an increased enrollment and due to an increase in enrollment, we propose to keep 3 of these 5 positions in order to return class sizes similar to pre-pandemic levels. And also a reading interventionist is also proposed in this budget, a reading interventionist at the middle school. This position was in place prior to the pandemic and would restore academic support at the middle school to a pre-pandemic level.
Before you go, can I just ask you one thing? Of those 3 teachers we want to keep, what's the target class size that we're trying to keep it at?
So it's grade dependent. In kindergarten, really no bigger than 18. First and second, 20-ish, and then 3 to 5, 25 is huge, so definitely under that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. So as I shared at the December Board of Ed meeting, an athletic trainer was hired to replace the services received from Quinnipiac Physical Therapy. So there is an approximate increase of $15,000 to this budgeted area as compared to 22-23. And for an additional $20,000, this proposal includes a middle school volleyball team, a middle school unified sports program, and an assistant golf coach in order to assist with supervision while out on the course. Capital projects. So Howard is going to discuss the capital plan for the district and highlight some of the high priority areas.
Patrick, can I just ask a quick question?
Can we go back?
The athletic trainer position, just to be clear, that's full-time?
It's 11 months, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. And they're here during the day too, they're not just here for after-school activities.
So it's a
Yeah.
full-time?
Yeah.
Full-time.
This slide,
Yeah, Andy, you agree?
so Patrick's going to be handing out the updated version of the capital that's in your binders. We've updated it to include, there's a couple changes. We've included the first, in your one that's in your binders, there was a note at the bottom about the roofs. I've actually included them at $500,000 apiece for each of the elementary schools. Also, what the town has asked us to do is you'll see there's a line in facilities and equipment. There's a $3.5 million addition there, and that is for the DeMayo Field and Tennis Court upgrade because they actually applied for a grant, they didn't get it, but we have to put it on to either our capital budget or the town's capital budget. It has to be shown there in order for us to go for another grant when we go for it. So they asked us to put it on ours because it's our fields. And so that's why you'll see those 2 changes are the major changes that occurred within that page. And then the second page that you'll be seeing, there's 2 pages, will be the full list of all of those items prioritized, high, medium, and low. So that's what those 2
Howard,
pages.
in terms of that 3.5 million, does it mean that we have to do it, or it's just there on paper?
It's just there to be, again, it's
Just to
it's
submit for that.
it has to, in the way, I guess the way they have to write the grants
Yes.
is that it has to be on someone's capital budget.
Okay,
And
it's not like we have to do it.
It's not, we have to do it. And that's why I put it out 5 years out,
Yeah.
so that it's out there and it sits out there until they write for the grant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this slide. The slide on the screen provided is a list of the high priority capital projects that have historically been paid from the capital project reserves, not the operating budget, and currently are not included in the fiscal '24 proposed operating budget. If they were to be included in the operating budget, they would add $195,000 to the budget, and the overall increase would go from the 2.87 to 3.2%. And as you all are aware, we report monthly on the available reserve balance that the Board of Ed has on deposit with the town. The November monthly report showed a projected available reserve was around $60,000. When adjusted to add back the 7.7K item not currently under consideration, that balance rises to the $67,000 amount. However, since that meeting, we have learned that the Clintonville intercom system is in need of repair and upgrade, which will cost approximately $60,000. As this is a high priority item related to safety, we intend to ask for authorization at the February board meeting for use of the funds from the capital project reserve. As I stated, the estimated cost to repair is about $60,000. Provided there are no further capital repairs, this will leave the balance of that fund on the town's books at $7,000 at the end of the year for our capital projects. We bring this to your attention as the list of high-priority capital projects, as stated, totals $195,000. As you can see, with the aging buildings, there's a constant need for capital improvements, and as the town does not provide the Board of Ed a separate capital budget, these items either need to be funded from the operating budget or from any potential excess funds at the year-end deposited into the capital project fund on the town's books. This will soon become the non-lapsing fund when the MOU between the town and the Board of Ed is agreed upon. As the year winds down, we will need to plan accordingly and to ensure that we can fund these critical items. And so I just wanted to bring that to your attention because, again, none of this is in the operating budget, and it's something that is critically needed to occur. So we're going to need to plan for this as we go forward.
Can I just ask, why wouldn't we include some of the critical items in the operating budget for the upcoming year, the 23-24 year?
We could include them. They're generally, historically, capital projects have not been included because it's always been funded. So theoretically, we could include them in there. That's what I just wanted to bring it to your attention. That's why we have a discussion about it tonight. So.
We just didn't want to intentionally add them in and change a practice that has been done. We just wanted to bring it to the board's attention and have discussion around it.
It's all good.
Thank you, Howard. So I've said this multiple times, and I continue to believe it. North Haven is known for its commitment to education and the community support of the Board of Education's annual operating budget. I truly thank you for continuously supporting the students and families of North Haven, and I look forward to our collective work and continued success. So next, Jen Stewart will highlight areas within her department's budget, as well as field questions and provide details as needed. Following Jen, there'll be an open discussion around the high school, IT, and facilities. In closing, there's an additional workshop scheduled for January 17th, where the board will have the opportunity to review and discuss the middle school, elementary schools, and athletics. And just as a reminder, the board's budget needs to be transmitted to the town by January 27th. Thank you all very much for listening to our presentation, and thank you for all that you do for the students and the families here in North Haven. So before turning it over to Jen, are there any questions from the board regarding this overview?
I do have a couple, if that's okay. So do we have a projection on the grand list from the town just yet? I know that, usually under 3% requested increase is considered reasonable. We're at 2.87%. And as you showed and walked us through, we're providing an excellent value when you look at the per pupil expenditure versus the outcomes. So my question is, do we know if 3% is reasonable this year, especially since the town has been kind of knocking it out of the park on adding to that top line revenue from an economic development perspective. So just wondering if Mr. Monaco or Mr. Frieda has given us any insight on that.
Nothing solid, just some discussions, and we've shared our planning, they've shared some of theirs, but there's nothing set in stone.
Okay. And then as of the last reporting period on EdSite, it looks like 8% of our funding comes from the state of Connecticut, which is significantly lower than the average that other districts within our DIRG receive. My understanding of that is that most of the money that we get from the state of Connecticut is in the ECS grant, or comes from the ECS grant. So I'm just wondering if there's any ideas. I know that we don't control that formula, but are there any additional grants that I know, Melinda, you look at grants all the time and you're applying for grants all the time, but just is there anything else that we can be doing as a district to try to move ourselves from that 8% to the 16% average for the rest of the districts in our DIRG?
I think we are exhausting everything that we can as far as our title grants or whatever we're receiving from the state. And I don't see a way to improve that percentage at this time. We spend a lot of time with the grants. Melinda is kind of the grant master over there, and what she's able to secure for us is, as I said earlier, pretty miraculous from time to time.
It sure
And some
is.
of them will hit a ceiling because the state pulls our data. So, you know, our numbers of English learners, our numbers of immigrant students, our numbers of free and reduced. So those things, they cap us at a certain point. So those are more of the entitlement consolidated grants, but.
And we are a very well-run town, and I think that plays a part into what is provided to us.
But whenever we find competitive grants that are put out, we try for them.
Do you know what proportion of the money from the state comes from the ECS grant versus other grants? I think it's the lion's share, isn't it?
I believe it is, yes. It's something we could dig into for you.
And that's
see if there's a
like,
percentage.
just for everybody listening, that's like well outside of our sphere of influence.
Mhm.
Actually, to go on, to build on what everyone's saying so far too, it's exactly, not even the ECS grant, but the excess cost grant, which is that. So right now, and for the last 2 years, it's coming in around 80+%, because the state is, we budget at 70%, it's becoming in around 82%. However, the state did come out with they came up with a new listing of how where your town would sit if they had to cut spending. And so we just happen to be in that top category where if spending was cut, we go right down to the 70%. And then there's more towns that are more needy, so to speak, are at 75, 77, 80%. So like big cities are at the 80%, whereas we get dropped right down just because of where we are from the perspective of free and reduced and all that type of stuff. So it's kind of it's kind of in the sense that we are a well-run town, and you're more of a better off town, so to speak, for lack of a better term, a more wealthier town, financially stable town, and therefore you're going to receive less from the state.
And it kind of goes that same way on the academic performance as well. We're performing above our peers, so we're not under oversight of the state or anything like that, so there's no additional funding coming for that.
Definitely, and that makes sense to me. That's why I like to look at our other districts in our DIRG, so that we're not comparing ourselves against Darien, because they're very different from us, or like a massive different district like New Haven or Bridgeport that has just like so many more kids, so those are fundamentally different. So when I'm looking at this, I'm just looking at comparing us against, you know, the Milfords, the Wallingfords, the Rocky Hills, the Bethels, the Berlins of the world. But that makes sense to me, so thank you for that wonderful answer. Do we anticipate, from an overall level of this budget, do we anticipate is there anything that is not in this budget that would impact a classroom?
No.
And are there any areas of improvement that we've identified that are not capital and that are not in this budget?
They're not capital, so not physical.
So not like this list, because like this is not in the budget right now. But these are things that I would say like go from, we definitely need these, to like maybe these are nice to haves as opposed to need to haves this year. So I'm thinking like aside from this list, is there any area of improvement that is not in the budget?
I don't believe there is, but I think it's also a good question to ask the principals when they come as well. I know you normally do.
I will.
I just have a broad sweeping question, more from my own knowledge base. So you started the presentation noting that we were $181 less than average for the per pupil expenditure. So how does this budget planning affect that? Is there ever a concern that the gap may get worse? And are we planning enough dollars that we don't drop any lower, or is our goal to try and move up to at least be at the average?
Our goal is to make sure that we're funded as our own district. These are just used as comparative numbers. We never know how other districts are going to come in until their budget is approved. But since I've been here, we've always maintained that middle ranking. We've never dropped or really gone up. I think we were 14 last year. We've gone up to 11, but it's always in that range. But those top spending districts have always been the top spending districts too.
Okay. So you don't think that the deficit is at risk for getting worse?
It's hard to predict, but I
If
can't.
another district
Right.
changed and funded differently, we might drop.
But as our performance is shown, and that we are performing well with the money that is being dedicated to our students and staff. So that's a good indicator too.
Yeah, as long as it stays that way.
I do have another question too. Are you all set?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
So, do we think enrollment's going to continue to rise? Like, how is kindergarten enrollment looking this year? I know it's like just.
Yeah, we did
Too
those
early
things,
for
yeah.
kindergarten, but we are seeing consistent increases in enrollment, particularly at the elementary schools. I watch the numbers come in and out with PSIS, and they're picking up kids all the time, not just at regular registration periods.
It's so lovely that young families want to come here. That makes me happy.
So Melinda and I were actually talking about this afternoon, and we pulled up the January enrollment data. And when you look at Ridge and Green Acres, when I was principal at Ridge, and Lori and I would just mess around and see who has the bigger school, because we were so tight as far as who had the higher enrollment. And that was, touching 400, 390. Now both those schools are significantly over 400 students. Clintonville has grown significantly, as well as Mount Louise. Clintonville, I think, is in the 300s. When I first started, not as superintendent, but as principal, they were in the 200, high 200s. So we're growing.
And we still have plenty of capacity from a space level at our elementary schools, right?
Ridge is getting tight.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Green Acres is a little bit tight too.
Green Acres is tight as well, yeah. Certainly.
No, that was going to be my question with the, how are we doing on space since we're getting so many more?
Yeah, we put in a
students?
budget line for ladders for the roof in case we can.
Because you were saying, like, we don't want everyone to get to a 25 classroom.
Right, and then the issue is if we get to that point and we don't have classrooms to open, then that becomes a different conversation.
Right. Or is all the space in Ridge and Green Acres like full? Are there any open classrooms, or they're all being used, aren't they?
Yes, they are.
We have a
Yeah.
little bit of space for some supplemental classrooms, but we really don't want to have to give those spaces up either because they're important learning environments too. So it's a real balance.
It's a conversation we have with Mr. Strickland and Mr. McLaughlin all the time about their space, their needs, and trying to plan for that. Because we don't want to have to be reactionary, we want to be planful like this.
Is there a steady increase in enrollment that we're seeing, or is it just kind of?
It's
hit or
a
miss?
smattering,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
It
all
just
over the
depends.
place. Sometimes there's some out and then they come in and it balances, but unfortunately it's no perfect science, and
Sure.
you have a grade that's maybe a little heavy and it just, the way it goes, that's the grade you keep getting more enrollment in, so it's tricky.
Are we seeing that same, like that growth in the middle school and the high school, or those are pretty steady? We're just seeing that growth in the younger school?
I think we're seeing more in the younger areas that it's starting just to move up.
And at the secondary, we were already, our enrollments were a little bit lower there, just the way the population was over the years. So as they're coming up, it's going to be increasing though.
Like I think, and Russ, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the senior class at the high school is rather small. I think it's around the 215 area, but the 8th grade class in the middle school is around 250 or so. So it's definitely going to change how the enrollment looks at the high school next year.
Are we seeing a drop? Last question on enrollment, I'm just curious, are we seeing a drop from 8th grade going into the high school? Or are we seeing most of those kids track into North Haven High?
Most of the kids track into it.
Do we have like actual numbers? You don't need to tell me now, I'm just curious.
I don't have actual numbers. And for recent numbers, we did this a few years ago to look at it, but we can update.
Anybody else? All set?
Jen?
Sure, thank you. The Department of Student Services encompasses a wide range of services for general education and special education students. Student Services provides instructions and guidance for students in the areas of academics, behavioral support, mental health support, gifted and talented, nursing, college and career readiness, individual educational plans, and 504s. The priorities for the department are the following: provide individual programming for students to meet their needs aligned with grade level standards, continue to build capacity in the intensive learning and therapeutic programs so students are educated in a North Haven school, ensure students and families are provided high-quality support and resources surrounding overall well-being, mental health, and skills to be successful members of society. The special education staff, related service providers, and school counselors collaboratively develop programs to align to a student's strengths and needs. The staff work hand in hand with parents to develop an IEP or 504. Students work on grade level standards in academic areas with accommodations and/or modifications as appropriate. The staff are successfully implementing CT SEDS. They continue to be more comfortable writing comprehensive 504 and IEPs in the new system. The system will also include SRBI and gifted and talented tracking over the next few years. There are 3 school counselors at North Haven Middle School and 5 counselors at North Haven High School who are overseen by a coordinator. There is an appropriate number of school counselors to address the needs of each student for the following: academic support, college planning after high school, employment after high school, and mental health support. The school-based mental health clinicians are in each school across the district. They work collaboratively with the district social workers, school psychologists, and school counselors. The partnership between the parties strengthens the support for the student and family. The district continues to contract with a variety of vendors to support student needs across the district. The district continues to partner with Apex Educational Solutions to provide behavioral analysts and registered behavioral technician support. The district partners with different psychiatrists and neurologists to conduct evaluations on students. The outcome of the evaluation is for an expert in these 2 fields to provide programming recommendations to the team and parents to support the student within the district. The use of assistive technology, which includes tools for students to access the general education curriculum, continues to benefit students. The district currently uses New England Assistive Technology. The consultants from New England Assistive Technology evaluate students, trial equipment with students and staff, and consult with the staff and parents. The district contracts with outside vendors to provide speech and language and occupational therapy support to students across the district due to the increased number of students requiring this service. The anticipated goal is to hire a part-time occupational therapist for the preschool using IDA grant funds for the 23-24 school year. Another anticipated goal is to hire a part-time speech and language therapist using IDA grant funds for the next school year to address the needs of students across the district. The district works with a psychiatric APRN monthly. The staff reviews cases with this consultant and implements recommendations. This service provides the staff with a unique perspective on how to program for a student to ensure students learn within the district. At times, a one-on-one nurse is needed to assist a student during the school day who requires intensive care. When a personal nurse is needed for a student to attend school, the district is responsible for paying the cost. The average daily rate ranges between $150 and $175. The district continues to build the intensive learning program and therapeutic learning program. In these programs, behavioral analysts support the teachers and the students. Currently, there are 48 students in the intensive learning program district-wide, and there are 28 students in the therapeutic learning service program. The number of students in both programs continue to grow. For this school year, an increase of behaviors exhibited by students at the elementary level have resulted in the need for additional support by behavioral analysts. The additional support has led to students staying in his or her home school or transitioning to the intensive learning or therapeutic learning service. To be proactive, I would like to ensure that support is provided to students and staff for the next school year. The behavioral analysts support students and staff to understand a student's behavior. They provide strategies to decrease a student's behavior over time, which allows the student to self-regulate emotions. Over the past few years, the role of the paraprofessional has shifted to support our students. The paraprofessionals support students who require adult support for an individualized educational plan. Most of the paraprofessional's responsibility is to support students who require behavioral support within the classroom setting so he or she can access the general education curriculum with accommodations or modifications. The certified staff are the main implementers to provide instruction to a student. Students in the general education classroom are supported instructionally by the classroom teacher, reading or math coach, or interventionist when additional support is needed. Paraprofessional costs are managed through the general operating budget and the special education IDA grant. The district is responsible for paying for tuition and transportation for students who attend another public school outside of North Haven who either have a 504 or IEP. Examples of the school that the students attend are Lyman Hall, Vinyl Tech, Eli Whitney, New Haven Academy, and Platt Tech. Currently, there are 21 students, and this number can change based on enrollment through the school year. Thank you. Anyone have any questions?
Jen, the 21, is that a reduction? I know with COVID and everything, is that a reduction? Because if I remember, a couple of years ago, the idea was to kind of decrease the number of students who were going off district.
So that's for what Patrick talked about, the special education only schools. These are public schools or magnet schools or tech schools that the students go to that we still need to pay transportation and tuition for if they have an IEP or
Okay, because they offer something.
They offer something. It's more of like the tech,
Exactly.
the tech piece. But what Patrick was talking about was just our straight special education schools that the students go to that are out of district. That has decreased to 18.
Okay. So we're seeing a continued decline.
Correct.
And then we're buffing up our services and support that we're doing.
Correct, to keep the students in.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
How does the ECA program fit in to this? Like the students who go for the arts program through ACES, like after most of school, is that part of these tech? No,
It's not part of this, we just provide the transportation to the students.
And is that the only cost associated with that program?
With the ECA.
It's just transportation?
I believe so.
No, there's tuition. There's tuition.
tuition.
It's like, yeah, it's about $80,000.
Perfect. Is there any impact on our budget for the community-based health services?
No, we don't have to pay for the community-based health service, we just have to make sure we have a spot in each school for the clinicians.
So just to make sure I understand, we have community-based health services at all schools, and there is no cost to the district?
Correct, and the 4 elementary schools, there's 1 clinician for 2 schools and 1 clinician for the other schools. And if our enrollment is needed, we can reach out to see if we need full-time clinicians at each elementary school.
Are we seeing adoption of those programs?
Yes, especially at the middle and high school, but I've seen more buy-in from families at the elementary school this year, since we fully implemented in September.
And how many students do the 3 counselors at the middle school and the 5 counselors at the high school have? Like, do we cap it at a certain number?
So they're about 175 each.
That's a lot of kids.
Which is still under, because the cap is about 220.
And is that our cap, or is that like a state cap?
State.
Okay. With the contracted vendors, do we have regular evaluations with them? And if so, how often do they take place?
So with our vendors, I'm the one that contracts with them, so I regularly have conversations with them to make sure their vision and the district's vision is on par. And if there's a contractor that I'm not happy with, I just don't ask them back.
Okay. So that's I was going to ask what the levers are that we can pull if we're not happy with our speech and language therapist, or if there's an issue there, we don't have to continue with them and we have options.
Yep, so the contracts go year to year. So after a year, I renew every July. So if I'm not happy with services, I can reach out. And there's some providers I use for, let's say, auditory processing. I go to I have one certain contractor for that, which some of our students who are hearing impaired, I use another service. So I kind of go to where the strengths are for each vendor, because I just don't like a one fit, one box.
Are any of the speech and language or OT PTs hired by the district, or they're all contracts?
We are all hired by the district, except PT is hired by an outside provider. And because we've had an influx in speech services, I do have to reach out to outside providers, but that's why through my IDA grant, the goal is to hire part-time through, that will be our employees.
Okay. You mentioned elementary school classrooms and additional supports available there. I've been talking to other friends on other boards of education, and it seems like the pandemic has had a real impact on the elementary school level. So can you help me understand a little bit more about what
we have available to our elementary school teachers. And it looks like we've shifted away from general education paras and to special education paras, which is great. But I just want to kind of understand, like, is that impacting our elementary school teachers at all? Or like, how do the behavioral therapists fit in there as well?
So the behavioral analysts, we have 3 that are district-wide. And they're not here every day, but it varies. They each have a schedule and they go to each of the schools that need the support. And if there's a student at a particular school that needs the services, they kind of just have conversations with me and we provide that service. So it's more of a consultation basis with the behavioral analyst. There's registered behavioral technicians who work with some of our really intense kids in our therapeutic and intensive learning program. So to provide that support. And then the paraprofessionals, when I first became director, there was maybe 5 general ed paraprofessionals, but in time we've shifted them because we've noticed our special ed students need that extra support really for that behavioral support versus the academic support. Because the academic support should be coming from the special ed teacher, who's the certified staff, and the regular education teacher, and then they should be doing it together as well.
So, just so I understand, the additional support in the classrooms, the behavioral issues, are being helped by the special ed paraprofessionals, or is that a separate?
No, they can support that as well. Because the paras can support the behaviors. So like a behavioral analyst can come in and give recommendations and train the para to work with a student as well. And that happens all the time in the district.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Jen, the college transition program, are you still doing it? I know with COVID and everything, what's the plan with that?
So when we did like the night events for parents,
Yes.
yes, I did one last spring again, and the turnout was not great. So I'm trying to look at how to revamp it to kind of get more families and students involved.
Okay.
Because I know the counseling department at the high school does some nights where they, some colleges come in, but like really talking about students that have 504 or IEPs to kind of broaden that, and I'm trying to revamp that to get more of a buy-in.
Okay, but the idea is to still do it this spring.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Thanks, Ron.
You're welcome.
Howard found out some information, just to backtrack a little bit.
To your grant question, Amanda. So I did the calculation. So basically, the budget for the state and federal grants that we are receiving, outside of just the ECS, is we have a budget, right, this is 2.2 million, is what we're receiving from state and federal grants. That's like the IDEAs, all those. The grant that we get for the ECS is $3,993,000. So if you do the percentages on that, from the state and local grants, we're getting about 35% of makes up coming from outside of this, and then 65%, round numbers, makes up is coming from just the ECS by itself.
Perfect. Because, I mean, I asked that question because in my personal opinion, I think that ECS is what's killing us, and we don't have any control over that formula. That's
Correct,
at the
that
state
goes right
level.
into the town, that goes right into the town general fund. We do not see any, theoretically, we don't see any of that funds, it goes right to the town directly.
The next area up, sorry,
That's all right.
is Dr. Dye and Mr. Rousseau and Mr. Bushnell and Mr. Lawrence from the high school. So are there any questions around the high school budget? They're here to help support.
Yeah, and I can just say that our budget was made as usual in a really collaborative process. Our budget at the high school is a composite of departmental budgets plus the administrative elements of the budget. So each coordinator works with their teachers based on their known needs, their plans for the future. They present their budgetary requests. For every line item in their budget, they provide a detailed analysis, rationale of the elements. They share it with their people, they meet with me, and then I have the opportunity to meet with Superintendent Sturck and Mr. Wardlow, who are always receptive and supportive. We talk it through. There are no parameters put on anybody saying, you know, don't ask for things, keep it down. It's basically, what do you need? The coordinators do a really nice job with one another, pardon me, in terms of, you know, stepping up when they need a big purchase, new textbooks, new chairs. They talk to each other, I gather, because things seem to go smoothly year to year. So we've had all those discussions this year, and so the budget that we're presenting for the high school is, it's a modest increase, quite in line with, and actually, I think, a little bit less than the overall increase with a couple of minor exceptions. One is we moved the screens for graduation, those big, beautiful screens, into the high school budget. They were paid for by the district for several years, but they've been really, I think, an important part of the graduation ceremony. People have loved them, so that added a % or two. But aside from those screens, I think we're a little bit below the overall increase for the district. And I know you have the document there, so I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have about it.
Ross, so the screen is the only additional capital expense?
No, I wouldn't say that. I would say overall, without the screens, the net request gain, I think, is just under 2%. There are things, the budget is really a live and legitimate document. It's not like we took last year's budget and advanced the exact same thing forward. So there's areas that have decreased based on need. There's new things added to the budget. This is a document that has been created anew this year based on the needs for next year by the people doing the work in the departments. And then there are 2 administrative elements to the budget, and we do those pieces ourselves.
Okay, so in terms of like actual numbers, the screens are how much?
The screens come to, I think, something like $15,000.
Okay, and that's the one that's the outdoor one for graduation.
Yeah, those are the ones that allow.
I'm trying to figure out how what it looks like from last year.
Yeah, I mean they're gorgeous and they really make the ceremony. Because if you think about our graduation, we have an enormous turnout. We have almost 2,500 people, right? And so there's a lot of competition as to who sits where, but these screens have made a huge difference in terms of making the ceremony and the graduates visible to everybody at the ceremony. So the screens, Jen found them. She did excellent work in working with the vendors, making sure they were the right screens, making sure they were positioned properly, and it just adds a beautiful element to the ceremony that allows all the family and friends to see their graduate come across the stage clearly. And so I think it's a wonderful addition. I request the continued support of those. But that's really the biggest additional piece that I say puts us a little bit over the increase we wanted to be at, but overall we're in good shape. And it's just moving the money, really.
Okay, and there's no staffing additions or anything?
No, we don't have staffing additions or cuts, no.
Okay.
We're in good shape.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's 2 probably pretty simple questions. One, it looks like the total amount for textbooks has gone down like $17,000, $18,000 from the budget last year. We still have everything we need. Is that what is that a result of? Just not needing to upgrade certain books, or?
That's exactly right, Joe. That's exactly right. So there are years when it goes up, right? And because you may need to buy a set of 125 books that are $95 each or $125 each. And then there are years where you're just set. You have adequate books, or there are some courses that decided they no longer need a textbook because they're just really happy with accessing material digitally. So that's exactly right.
Interject on that too. There have been some areas that we've talked about at CNI too, that we've had some monies in the current budget, so we were able to kind of front load it and get ahead of it. So we just try to be as creative as we can.
I don't know if it's really a question as much as just a pet peeve, but I see the athletic transportation budget request went up by like $5,000. Grand scheme of things, it's not a whole lot of money, but again, I don't know if we're really getting what we're supposed to be getting for athletic transportation. And do we have any inkling of an idea of if we're going to be able to get all of our student athletes to and from events and everything without combining buses or problems or anything like that next year?
I mean, I'd love to say yes. I think that's probably more apropos to the athletic discussion.
Yeah, right.
We know buses are a challenge, right?
Yeah.
We're out there every day, and there's a lot of combining buses and things, but I think that remains to be seen and probably is best discussed by Steve.
And the winter season, talking with Steve, is kind of the most hectic because basketball, you got sometimes multiple buses. And so far, the bus company has been doing a good job covering those, much better than the fall season. So that's a good sign.
Be here next month.
They will, good.
Right?
Thank you.
They're still here for next month
Yes.
to come in and
I
speak.
spoke to Mr. Hipsher, and he will be present on February 9th to speak with the board. He's the GM and everything.
We'll be here.
I do have a couple areas.
Thank you.
All right, good, Ross. On the road.
No, that was just an appetizer.
I was doing so well.
It's all good stuff. The arts access, right? So I'm looking at our next generation accountability reporting, right? Arts access is something that has been lower proportionally from when we compare to other districts within our DIRG. Word on the street is it might be a coding error at the high school. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like help me
Yes.
understand what's going on there.
Yes, so it is. We have found that there were a number of coding errors. So every course that's created in Power School has a certain number of codes behind the scenes that explain what it is, how many credits, and what grades are eligible to take, and things of that sort. And we have discovered through an analysis of this that some courses which may have been older or may have been added at some point were not properly coded, or the coding has changed over time and it needed a fresh look. So we did put a committee together. We've been working on that. Mr. Bushnell, some of the coordinators, Anthony Mastriano, the head of student services, and they have found things that can be improved for us because I think the numbers are inaccurately low for us, and we were very frustrated to see it. So we have been working to get that fixed, and I think the majority of it is already done, and we're going to keep looking at it, but we have to have a process to make sure that that is done properly for every new course, and that it is examined periodically as things evolve with the state in terms of what they take. I mean, they didn't always pull that information for that purpose. So they may have pulled it for credit purposes only, and now they're doing these different kind of analyses, and so it's really important we get it right.
And one of the pieces that we've been talking about here with new courses, we're offering some half-year music and art courses so that students have more opportunities to take the arts classes if they can't commit to a full-year course.
So can you help me understand like what kinds of art classes are available at the high school? Just like some examples.
Gosh, everything from
Yeah,
drawing to
there's a
ceramics
pop-up art
to
class, there's a visual art class, there's photo. You know, and I mean, it's funny because some of the arts classes are almost merging with some of the business classes at this point because marketing and art are very, you know, they're in the same field in some cases now. So I'd be delighted to share with you the program and the courses. Our art teachers are phenomenal. One of our teachers was just out by the cafeteria. They actually sell and give away some of the beautiful crafts they make, and it exposes other kids to the courses to be able to take them. And Melinda's right. I mean, sometimes the way things are counted, and I'm not throwing stones at anybody, the way things are counted are funny because you could take a full year art course and it counts as one, or you could take 2 half-year courses and it counts as 2. And, you know, not that we're looking to be crafty about this stuff, but we really needed to delve deeper into the algorithm and understand how these things are being measured, and it is not always a clear thing. So there was homework to be done, and I'm appreciative of the work that was done.
And like we talked about at our last Board of Ed meeting too, we're able to offer so many wonderful electives to our students, which is great. But when there's so many things, you know, there's less things that students can, you know, they can only fit so much into their schedule. So, you know, you may have more of an interest in wanting to take some of our business electives or our culinary or our career and tech ed, then that of course takes away from the arts too. So it's a real balance. We have lots of choice for students, but sometimes the choice doesn't work out in our favor either.
Right.
And you know, you mentioned, thank you for that. That's very helpful. You mentioned coordinators. You mentioned coordinators a couple times. I was on a PTA meeting with Ms. Bankowski at the middle school, and she was also talking about coordinators. And afterwards, several parents were like, I don't know what that means. Can you help me understand what a coordinator is and what they do?
Yes, department coordinators are leaders within their disciplines who help do some incredibly important work in the school. They work directly with the teachers. They help to ensure curriculum is written. They're in every classroom every week. They support the teachers. They do the work on the ground to find out what's needed for certain things for budgetary purposes. They do coaching. They lead the walkthroughs that the administrative teams go on. They join us in our walkthroughs. We have all different variations of those. Sometimes we have teachers from other departments walk with us to see classes. We talk about the practice. We talk about what things are going well, how we might replicate those things in other places. So they are incredibly important to the work we do here, and I thank you guys for those coordinators. They work directly for Melinda and for Ms. McKenna, pardon me, and they're a great asset to us. And it's a wonderful team of people too. They're very devoted educators, very competent, and they have the trust of their department, so they're an excellent part of our team.
And this might not be a question for you, but I don't know generally. Is that seen as part of the career progression scale? Like teachers become...
They're like teacher leaders in their areas of content. I think that's a perfect way of saying it. We prefer, and I believe, maybe just with exception of one, they all have an 092, which is an administrative certification, and many have leadership aspirations. But the beauty of the role is that they are peers with the teachers in their departments. They have some teacher leadership, but there's no supervision, so that it's a really safe place for them to coach and model instructional strategies in the classroom, and then teachers to work collaboratively with them.
That's great. I was looking at our teacher retention rates, and I think our teachers have done a phenomenal job throughout the course of the past few years. It's unprecedented time, and offering career growth and a path that is visual and clearly understood is really important. So do I understand that seems like it's part of the...
And they apply each year. It's annually we post for those positions, so interested teachers apply, and then we interview and select.
So it's a rotational thing.
It depends. Sometimes no one else we don't have anybody else that applies, so or the person who has it is the best choice in the candidate pool, but there's an opportunity to apply annually.
So when you become a coordinator, that's for how many years?
Just one.
Just for 1 year?
Yep.
Okay, so it's a learning experience, a practical learning
Right.
experience.
I mean,
okay.
often many of them stay on because they really like the role, and
Yes.
and often it's actually pretty rare that that somebody else doesn't apply, though they can. Like this past year, we had quite a turnover. We have had a few new coordinators, which is great.
So when they leave that position, they go back to the classroom?
Yes.
Okay.
Or they retire.
Oh, they retire, okay.
Some of them go to become principals somewhere else. So there's a whole lot of reasons why somebody might leave it, but yes, then you would just go back into whatever you were teaching.
Okay, and then typically coordinators, I know you say it's course-based, so typically in the high school, how many would you have?
Oh, it's more content-based.
More
So,
content, yeah.
like, for example, K-12 science, there's a coordinator.
Okay.
Same social studies. Language arts, we separate a little bit differently. We have a K-8 person, and then we have a 9-12 person. We change it sometimes due to the need of the department and the content area.
Okay, so they go between different grades, basically. Okay.
And then we have some for elementary, and then like career and tech education. So they're different areas. We try to consolidate as best we can, but make it manageable, of course.
Okay.
And Amanda, just to jump on your question about a career pathway, a lot of these coordinators, when the need arises at the administrative level, they will fill in for spots left by administrators due to a leave or whatever it may be. And we get to see them in that area. So it gives us an idea how they would adapt to the administrative role as well.
For instance, like Lori Biankowski, she was a math coordinator prior to being an administrator.
Just from a board member perspective, having had the opportunity through committee work to meet a lot of the coordinators and see what they do every day, it's exceptionally impressive to get to talk to these people, their dedication to their job, the passion they have for their job, and the content that they're working on and continuously developing it blows you away when you actually get a little one-on-one time with them.
They're
It's
dynamic.
phenomenal. They really are great.
And it's
Organization
real
of content is
Yeah.
And we,
Yep.
as a district, have come a really long
Yeah.
way in terms of the role. I think you would agree, Russ, right? And just
Absolutely.
the capacity and they really are, they're such a advocate and a liaison for their departments and their teachers too, which is really great.
Anybody else? Thanks, Russ.
Thank you guys very much. Thank you for all the support.
Thanks.
Moving on to Gen K and IT.
A lot of the technology stuff this year is very status quo over last year. However, we're always expanding on some of our areas. So we found a lot of enjoyment with our elementary students for the Capstone Interactive eBooks. So we'll be purchasing additional hundreds of Capstone eBooks if we're fulfilled for their funding. So what I really love about the Capstone eBooks, and I think that the teachers and librarians could share with you as well, is that it's not reading for points, it's not reading to take a quiz, it's truly just reading for pleasure for the children. They can pick from a variety of topics. I worked with Tracy Gambardella, who's the K-8 ELA coordinator, to select books that are age and interest appropriate for the children. So there's something in there that they would want to go and take out and read. And it also has some really nice differentiated pieces to it as well. They can play it out loud as an audio book. They can set it to flip the pages for them or to read it like a regular book by clicking through the pages. They can have it bounce and highlight along the words as they're reading, which is really nice for our beginner readers as they're starting to get into the idea of reading for pleasure. It's a book, but it's an e-book, and we really wanted to offer the ability for our students not just to read here at school, but to have something that they could do at home as well, and that's what those Capstone Interactive books offer them. So that's wonderful, and we're so happy for that. We do have plans this year to revamp the Green Acres audiovisual situation. They have been using an inflatable screen for their school-wide assemblies for the past few years. They would really like a permanent pull-down screen for their gym area, so when they all get together for a nice presentation by a student organization or by the principal, some sort of presentation, that they have a nice stable screen and a nice new projector in there so they can have a quality setup for the students. So that's something that now that we're getting them all back into rooms together, which is so lovely to see, we would love to be able to fund that request so they can enjoy those items together on something that's not an inflatable screen, because that takes a little extra setup on their part for sure. So the last kind of addition to this year would be a change out of our firewall. You'll see there's a reduction in the leasing schedule, and that is because I would be looking to outright buy the firewall rather than adding it into a structured finance as we've done previously, because I'm hoping to garner E-rate funds to pay for a portion of that project. Our E-rate percentage for this year is 50%, and we do have enough money in our Category 2 monies, which is money that's allotted to us by the E-rate and USAC committees based on our free and reduced lunch populations. So we're allotted X amount every 7 years based on our free and reduced lunch populations. We have Category 1, which helps us pay for about 50% of our network connections, so our internet costs and our intranet costs between the buildings. And then the Category 2 monies, that's where we only get so much to spend, and then we spend it down over a number of years, and then it's replenished. So we should have enough in there to help offset about 50% of the cost of that firewall. I know firewalls can be kind of a complicated thing to think about, but they really just protect our network, protect our students. They offer those VPNs, filters, all kinds of good stuff that really need in the age of the information security influx that we really need right now, that everybody really needs right now. Are there any questions about anything?
I have.
Yes.
This is definitely not my area of expertise, so it just doesn't make any sense. Just tell me and I'll try to reword it. But if we buy our firewall, does that come, like, don't you have to continuously like keep them upgraded and up to date, or?
Yeah, so we currently have a firewall. You can't not have a firewall.
Right.
The one that we have currently, I believe, it predates me. So it's definitely time to look at getting a new one, getting an upgraded one with additional features. I've looked at adding additional subscriptions and upgrades to the one that we currently have. However, some of the feature sets that I'm specifically looking for that I think are very important to the district, and I want to keep it just vague on the level of security there, aren't available on the current model that we have, which necessitates us looking at getting a new appliance. And yes, there is a running subscription cost to that. However, the running subscription cost for the one that we have is rather high. And I do think that switching to a different model of firewall could be helpful for that. Another thing that we have is I'm hoping to get some bids in on this E-rate project for more local vendors that can support maybe a different brand, because we have a lot of trouble finding local support when we do need like contract services and assistance with upgrades, because there aren't a lot of people who service this particular one that we have. So we're looking to be able to build capacity in using this with our internal staff and get vendors to come in and help train our internal IT staff on these things. But it's just been really hard with the one that we currently have because of the age of it, and also because of the lack of local vendors to be able to perform those services for us.
So switching, is that, you said that's what equates to that cost difference that on the line item there?
Correct, because that would be, so for example, I think our firewall subscription for this year for our current one is about $13,000. And then I would be budgeting more than that, obviously, because we're getting a new physical appliance plus a 3-year license as a part of this E-rate project. So we wouldn't be looking at renewal of those license fees to maintain those updates and upgrades and everything for 2 more fiscal years after this purchase.
And the last thing, I guess it's not really much of a budget question, but as far as the capstone ebooks and stuff, just if whoever's watching this, they don't know, like, how do the kids access them or borrow them, or is there a number, like, you know, if there's a book one kid likes, can more than one person borrow the same book?
Yes, that's one of the things that I really like about Capstone, and we've tried to find something similar for middle and high school. In middle and high school, they use the SOAR application, which is really managed by the library media specialists. They work with the students, they'll take requests for those books, and then they purchase these licenses that are good for the year, and then they'll renew them if the kids are interested, but it'll allow them to buy like one license for one book to be borrowed by a student at a time. With the elementary level, with the Capstone ebooks, we buy a perpetual license, so every book that we buy through there is ours as long as we have that console, as long as we continue to keep the platform, and it's on a very stable educational software company that has been around for, you know, well over a decade at this point. So we see a lot of longevity in that. And then for that book, any number of students could read it at any time. There is no cap that 1 student or 5 students or 20 students could be reading it at a time. If there's a popular book, they could all read it at the same time as a class together if they wanted as well.
Thank you.
I asked a question, and I think it's kind of connected to Ross had mentioned something about it. In terms of e-textbooks, what generally, especially at the high school level, what is the number of teachers or grades that are actually transitioning into electronic textbooks in compared to actually physical? Because I know, for example, libraries now are pretty much empty because everything is all done digitally and all that. But what's the percentage, and are we moving more towards more like electronic textbook, especially at the high school level?
So this is a collaborative question for Melinda too, but as the new curriculums are explored, when it is time for us to look at upgrading a set of textbooks or what direction they're going to go with the curriculum, they typically do look for a curriculum that also has an ebook component, but then they also will buy a classroom set of the textbooks. That way there is options for students who would prefer to have that hard copy and then have some in the classroom as well. But we do find that most students do want to have some sort of ebook copy for them. It'll allow them to do things that you really can't do when you take that paper book home. They can't highlight in the book that they get from school, but they really shouldn't. Whereas they could do highlights, or maybe they remember reading a passage and they wanted to go back and read it again. They can do a find feature within their textbook, within their text ebook, to find that passage that they need to review, that section that they need to review, rather than looking through the glossary and flipping through the pages. So we definitely find that that is in the interest of the students. They prefer that model. I couldn't give you an exact percentage because it really does depend on what's decided by the CNI with the coordinator for each content area as each content area comes up for review.
And having the hard copy set of textbooks in the classroom allows for teachers to really be able to engage with the classroom if they want to have the textbooks, but the kids aren't lugging them back and forth either. They'll have them digitally to access at home.
Okay, but it's part of our overall academic plan that if there's an opportunity to have ebooks as an option.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
that, okay.
Yes, we definitely get the digital version because they'll be updated and they give us other resources with that. But as I said, we typically will buy one set of a classroom set that is there of hard copy textbooks.
Because the reason why I was talking about the high school level is because even at the college level too, there's that transition
Very digital.
shift towards ebooks. So we want to make sure that the high school graduates are
Exactly,
used
we
to
want them
actually
to
using
be accustomed.
ebooks. Exactly.
We've had questions before at meetings about ebooks and being able to, so there is a classroom set of hard copy books, and the students can take those home, or they cannot take those home if they wanted to?
We typically leave them, as the classroom set, but if a family works with the building administrator, I'm sure we can make an arrangement on that.
Okay, so it can be requested that a student can, if they just don't like reading on the screen.
Are you doing the internship program again this year?
Yes, so we're doing 2 different internship programs. We started with 2 separate internship programs in the last academic year, so this is our second academic year having what we call the academic internships, which is a semester-long course that the students can come in. They actually will shadow members of the IT department. They will learn to fix computers, image computers, perform installs and updates, and all of those base level things that a computer technician might start off with as they're starting to get into technology service. They can learn a little bit about networking skills, a little bit about information security. So we're very lucky that our IT department is based here out of the high school because our high school students are able to come in and take these internships as classes during the day. So we have a few students who will take those throughout the year for academic credit, and then we have the summer internship job over the summer. So any student, sophomore, junior, senior, can take an academic internship. The summer internship is a paid internship and it is very competitive. We've had 30 plus applicants for the past few years, and it's usually about 5 spots for the kids to come in. They work for about a month. It's a really great first job or second job for a high school student to really get their feet wet with what it means to be an entry-level person working in the world of technology.
All right, the board saved all the tough questions for Phil. We'll open up to facilities and any questions, or Phil, if you'd like to highlight any of the drivers.
Basically pleased with the budget we put out this year, other than the uncontrollables, which of course is utilities. Our budget that I submitted, I think, is about $12,000 higher than last year's. We're running fairly lean and mean, and if you have any questions, just let me know.
Phil, that shed, the rental thing.
I'm sorry?
The rental shed. You remember from like years ago?
Mm-hmm.
So I think there was a plan to do something about it in terms of, I don't remember exactly, but that was something that kept on coming up in the budget.
Yeah, there's always a plan to do something about the rental sheds, but there's never enough money to really do anything about it. I mean, to do something about it, you really need to do it correct the first time, get enough space to basically house all the containers that we have out there. The problem is that those containers are situated in locations that the equipment is needed where it is. So if you take those containers and everything that's in them and build one shed somewhere, and it'd be a very large shed, probably 4,000 or 5,000 square feet, you would have to have someone bringing equipment to wherever it has to go every day for whether it's any type of sport, actually. So we have these containers spread out. They don't look good, but they serve the purpose at this time. Some of them, a lot of them we own. We only rent, I think, 3 of them.
You said that.
Right? Yeah, just 3 of them, and the rest of them we own.
And they're about $110 a month?
Yeah, about 110 a month.
Because I know that shed kept on coming up
Yeah.
in terms of the rental.
I would love to have a centralized facility. We need storage for even all the schools. The schools have no storage. We're ordering stuff monthly instead of having and buying stuff in quantity. You know, we could save money like that, but again, it takes square footage, which is something we don't get. Even when you build a new school, you don't get it. They don't like to figure that into the cost of building a school. So at this point, they're working well. I mean, in the future, you'd have to have nice looking sheds built in like 2 or 3 different sections so that you'd have the equipment in place for the athletes to actually go and get it, to bring it out to say the track or to the turf field or to the baseball fields. It's a very large campus to have it situated in one location.
Thank you.
Have you thought about doing anything to beautify
I'm sorry,
containers?
I didn't hear you.
Like, have we thought of doing anything to beautify the containers?
Yeah,
Is there just, like-
we actually bought this year, and as soon as spring comes and we get a little better weather, we're going to try and power wash and spray them. To at least try and get them to one color. But I know as soon as I do that, it's going to be like a easel once they're all done.
I wonder if we like asked kids to draw on it, if that would make it less cool, and maybe they'd stay one color. I don't know. Yeah, maybe art access.
Just to give you an example, in Stratford, they have those, they're electrical boxes right around where the lights are in the corners. They actually had students from high school come paint there. They paint them, make it beautiful. So these 3 other things, so they paint it as the song patches, and the art competition.
Yeah, they should.
It's a great idea in theory.
Another question is, like, there's a path that goes from Overbrook to the middle school.
Correct.
Where kids walk, but it gets really muddy, and I've seen kids slip there. Can we do anything?
Well, everyone would love to put a sidewalk there. That area there, eventually, I believe, will turn into more parking in the grand scheme of things, and what we're trying to do with all the athletics, because we are short on parking on that side. So that to put money into a nice sidewalk right now would be just throwing it away.
So when would we be planning on turning?
Well, that's difficult to give you a date.
Those are part of phase 2?
Yeah, it'd be part of like phase 2, yeah.
So, yeah, phase 2 is not funded yet as part of the grant that this last year is applying for the next $3.5 million that the town was originally got granted in 2021.
And okay, so that phase 2 would fix the walking path, though.
It would create a parking lot.
Right. but
So
like-
you wouldn't need a sidewalk.
But couldn't you put a sidewalk around the parking lot? Might as
No,
well.
I'm saying if we put a parking lot there, they'll have something to walk on. They won't be walking on mud.
Okay.
And it would be expensive to put a sidewalk there. Not-
I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but it would also be expensive if somebody really worked.
Especially with the grades and stuff that are there.
Yeah. You talked about utility costs being volatile. Is there anything, do you know of any districts that are doing anything creative to mitigate that volatility?
I gotta put that to Howard, because I know Howard has been looking at it.
So, right now, we are locked in with the town, with Johnson Controls did the lighting and stuff like that. Johnson Controls does the monitoring, but there's another contract that we're locked in with pricing. So our pricing shouldn't go up too much. It goes up at a standard rate. So 50, and it's not all of it, it's 50% of it. So 50% is on this locked-in contract, and 50% is on just it's variable. So some of it is going to go up, and we are seeing that now. As one of the trends when I actually built the schedule out, I was looking at the trends coming in this year, and they're going up significantly, like in the 20% range, right, already, and they haven't even done the increases yet. Right? So we're seeing that. I think part of that is because of buildings are being used more now as we're coming out of the pandemic, right? So year over year, you're seeing things being utilized more. There's more things going on in the buildings. Things are happening. So there's more usage being occurring. And we'll see the rates kick in now coming this part. So yes, we will see increases. But again, one of the things, again, we're looking to do is that solar. And so we're still looking to do that. We're still looking to do that. There's actually, we're working with them now, but that's going to be in conjunction with trying to replace the roof at Montaukese. That would actually be a free roof replacement if you put the solar on it. And you would also have to put solar on this high school in order to make it all work out. So that would be I'll come to the board with that final process when I get it. But I just want to give you a heads up that it is coming down. We are looking at things and we're looking at opportunities. And so there are more, I'm talking with Greenleaf Energy, who is with the solar. There are more grants coming out of the states now, and the federal government. So they're looking to work that into it also. Where else can we put solar? That'll also cut it. It'll either give us a revenue stream that'll reduce our electrical bill, or we can try and replace all the roofs on all the elementary schools, which are in desperate need of happening, and it'll be for free because we're putting solar on. So.
Speaking of the elementary school roofs, I saw those were added to the capital budget, or the capital request. But I wanted to talk, I know we had talked a while ago about air conditioning in the elementary schools. I would absolutely be derelict in my duty if I didn't bring it up again now. I looked at, when the buildings were built, how hot the last day of school was, the year the buildings were built, right? So in 1948, the last day of school was 73 degrees as a high. In 1965, the last day of school was 71 degrees as a high. And for the last several years, we have been in the 83 to 86 degrees on the last day of school thing, which it's a big difference. You can be very comfortable in a school building with the windows open and the fans on at 71 degrees. 86 degrees, less so. So I realize that we have strict money constraints here, but I wanted to talk about air conditioning a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, there's several issues that come into play with air conditioning in the elementary schools. And the first is their age. The second is their roof. And you put a brand new $1 million HVAC system, which would approximately be what it would cost to put HVAC in those schools. We had a study done a few years ago, and it was like $800,000 then. I'm figuring it's about $1 million now. Do you put it on old roofs, or do you have to do the roofs before you do the HVAC systems? So there's a lot of different things that come into play with it. It's very expensive. We tried to, the money came out this year from the state, and they put a program together that was unattainable for us because they only gave us like a month and a half to do the due diligence, which
It was more designed for
it was poorly designed the way they sent it out.
Aside from that, it was reimbursement. So for us, it doesn't have that thing. And Bill and I sat on the webinar, we're just upset about it because we didn't want us. I actually reached out to the town attorney, he said I had some experience with that as well. And he said, yeah, that's not perfect or okay.
I mean, the biggest problem is if you have a $4 million project and you have the engineering done, you have to pay 10% of that. So that's $400,000 that we would have to find before they even gave us the okay to do it. So we could be out to $400,000 and they can refuse us.
Yeah, I hear you on that, but so we're consistently coming in lower than districts in our district reference group from a budgetary perspective. And if this allows us to have better educational outcomes for the last month of school and potentially the first month of school every year, I think it's something that we should at least be talking about. I understand that it's expensive, and I'm not like, let's spend tons of money all over the place, but I do think we need to start talking about this.
I believe it would be a bonding issue, and we would have to bring it to the town, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So in that case, you would have to bond to do the roofs and bond to do the air conditioning, which you're going to be up around $8 to $10 million for 4 schools.
I don't disagree with you, and I remember it was several years ago, Dot and I were talking about this, and that's when we got into the whole study and everything that was done on the cost. And then I think the conversation also turns to, are we going to keep putting patches and dumping money on these schools, or do we need to start talking about potentially replacing some of the elementary schools? And then that definitely becomes a bonding issue.
Sure.
You know, the town has all sorts of debt service that we're continuously paying off, and some's going to be dropping off, but I agree, we need to get air conditioning into the schools for these kids, because I think you're being nice when you're saying it's the first and the last month of school. I think it's more than that they're in there and they're affected by it. But, you know, I think we got to decide as a board what is the proper way to go, and then work with the town and see what we can do.
Great.
Can I ask you a question, Amanda? Do you know when the last day of school was in 1948 or 1961 versus when the last day of school is now?
So I looked at the yearbooks for those years. So I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but it was around the same time in June too. So like from like a smell test perspective, it passed. It seemed reasonable.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was like they got out in the beginning of June versus near the end of June, and
it's basically mid-June it was mid-June in 48. I think it was like maybe a week or two earlier in 65. And then I do know
I can tell you in 1964, 1960, in Monterey School, it was very hot in the summer.
No, it's hot in there. It's hot in there.
Yes, that was when I was first director, he said, yes.
We've like chatted about this kind of randomly at some board of ed meetings, but with the roof and then the number of students growing, like, would there ever be talks of like changing a school or changing like locations of, I don't know, the more populated areas of North Haven and redistricting for the schools or building onto a school or something like that, maybe?
All of those things would be on the table during that discussion.
Yeah, okay.
But to be clear,
Yes.
just because before we start getting hate mail, nobody is saying that we would get rid of the ID program, right? Like, so redistricting would not include.
I'm just talking about space.
Right,
Wise
totally.
for air conditioning, and so if it's gonna cost this exorbitant amount of money to replace all the roofs and add air conditioning, what would be the cost of just, I don't know, building out
Next to
on
the
one
old-
school or building next to a school or something, that's all. I'm
Building
not
a
saying
mega
we're only,
elementary
we're doing that, that's not what I'm saying.
No,
I'm just
those options
curious
are on the
if,
table, and as Joe said earlier, Mr. Frieda stated at the last Board of Finance budget hearing last February that there is still some debt service to pay down at the police station
Sure.
and middle school, and he believes in a good, I think, 3 to 4 years from now, there will be opportunity to take steps in that direction.
Sure.
Prior to that, Howard and I have been taking few steps forward. We subscribe to an enrollment services company to help us with projections. I've recently met with the superintendent in Cheshire because they're going through a school modernization in their town. So just getting an idea of where he started and how that progression went. So that's been helpful for me to get our feet underneath us to start moving in that direction.
yeah, as if we keep getting all these kids and then we don't fit, I mean, eventually we're gonna have to talk about that, yeah.
Which is a good problem to have. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
too much
all it
vision.
is, yeah. I still got a little one, so he'd be in a new school, I'm all about it.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, that's why.
Anybody else?
Like fuel costs, how is that impacted in the budget? Because it keeps going up. I mean, there doesn't seem to be much in the way of
Well,
relief.
again, Howard runs those numbers and has a better handle.
Buses or
For,
natural
just,
gas?
no, for like gasoline, diesel,
So
whatever.
gasoline, so the equipment for facilities,
Yeah.
they actually get it from the town.
Okay.
From the town. For the buses,
Okay.
we actually purchase it off the state contract, which is the lowest possible rate you can get,
Yeah.
because there's nothing involved in it. So, yes, it's, right now, we're in the like $4 range for diesel, a little over $4 for diesel, and about $3.35, $3.50 for just the gas for the vans. That's what's in the those are the numbers that are in the budget that I'm using, but again, it's off the state contract, and that's how we.
And that's been a big change since the new bus contract, because prior, the bus company was purchasing gas for us at a higher rate.
And,
So
and they even had a markup on it, so that's why we went and did it on our
Yeah.
own.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Well, I'd like to thank everybody for showing up tonight and explaining their positions and answering all our questions. It's appreciated. Right now, I'd like to have a motion to adjourn the January 12th, 2023 special meeting of the Board of Education.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All set. Thank you very much.
The preceding program is brought to you in part through a grant from the town of North Haven. Watch town meetings or other videos on demand at nhtv.com.